So today, I want to approach things a bit differently. Usually, in this space, I focus on explaining what's happening in the present. I try to give you a clear way of thinking, a framework that helps you understand complex global events, and recently we've been doing that a lot while analyzing this conflict. But today, I want to take a step further. Today, I want to make a forward-looking assessment. Before I do that, though, we need to briefly go back, because understanding how we got here is essential. If you understand the reasoning behind earlier predictions, then what I'm about to say won't sound like a random guess or a bold claim. It will feel like a logical extension of everything we've already discussed. So let's rewind to mid-2024. At that time, the global situation appeared relatively stable. Political tensions were high, but nothing seemed on the verge of major escalation. Many analysts believed certain outcomes were unlikely. The general consensus was cautious, but not alarmist. In that context, a few key projections were made. Some of those projections have already played out, at least partially. Others are still unfolding. And that's important, because it shows that structured analysis, when done carefully, can reveal patterns before they become obvious. But here's the key point. Those earlier predictions were not based on intuition or guesswork. They came from a method, a framework that combines three main elements: structural analysis, incentive mapping, and historical pattern recognition. And today, I'm going to use that same framework to explore a much bigger question. How does this conflict actually end? Now, I don't want you to just accept any conclusion. The goal here is to walk through the reasoning step by step, so you can evaluate it yourself. So let's start with the method. First, structure. This means looking at the deeper forces that shape outcomes, things like geography, economic systems, and long-term capabilities. These factors don't change quickly, and they limit what's realistically possible. Second, incentives. Every actor involved is making decisions based on their own interests. Not necessarily what they say publicly, but what actually benefits them strategically. Understanding that difference is critical. Third, history. Not because events repeat exactly, but because patterns of behavior tend to reappear. Human decision-making, especially at the level of states and power, follows recognizable trends over time. Now, let's apply this. Start with incentives, what each side is really trying to achieve. On the surface, major powers often frame their actions in terms of stability, security, or defense. Those goals are part of the picture, but they're not the whole story. At a deeper level, influence over key regions, trade routes, and economic systems plays a major role. Energy markets, for example, remain one of the most important factors in global power dynamics. Maintaining influence over those systems helps sustain financial strength, global reach, and long-term stability. On the other side, regional powers are primarily focused on survival and autonomy. They've observed past conflicts, learned from them, and adjusted their strategies accordingly. Their goal is not necessarily expansion, but resilience, ensuring they cannot be easily weakened or isolated. At the same time, they also aim to strengthen their regional position and secure long-term recognition as key players. Other actors in the region are navigating between these forces. They are not as strong individually, so their strategy tends to be flexible, adapting quickly depending on how the situation evolves. Now let's move to structure, because this is where things become clearer. One major structural reality is the difference between types of military power. Some countries have overwhelming advantages in certain domains, especially in technology and air capabilities. This allows them to act quickly and with precision. However, history shows that this alone rarely determines the final outcome of a conflict. Sustained control, long-term stability, and political transformation are much more complex. They require different conditions and often much greater commitment. Another important factor is cost. Modern conflicts can become extremely expensive, especially when there is an imbalance in how resources are used. If one side can operate at a lower cost over time, while the other faces increasing financial pressure, that creates a long-term challenge. This kind of imbalance doesn't produce immediate results, but over time, it becomes significant. Then there's the economic dimension. Key trade routes and energy flows are deeply connected to global stability. Disruptions in these areas don't stay local. They affect prices, supply chains, and economic confidence worldwide. And when economic pressure increases, it doesn't just stay in markets, it becomes political. Public opinion begins to shift, questions are asked, support becomes conditional. Which brings us to another structural reality: political will. Sustaining long-term involvement in a complex situation requires consistent support at home, and that support can change over time, especially if costs, both economic and human, start to rise. History has shown that this is often one of the most decisive factors. So when you combine all of this, you start to see a pattern. Now let's explore possible outcomes. One scenario is a prolonged, limited engagement. In this case, actions continue without a major escalation. Both sides apply pressure, but avoid steps that would dramatically expand the situation. Over time, costs accumulate, and attention shifts toward finding a way to stabilize things. Another scenario involves a significant escalation, but this comes with much higher risks and uncertainties. It would require major commitments and could lead to outcomes that are difficult to control. Because of that, decision makers tend to be cautious about moving in that direction. So what seems more likely? Based on structural constraints and incentives, a gradual de-escalation becomes a strong possibility. Not immediately, but over time. This doesn't mean a clear or simple resolution. Instead, it likely involves a shift in priorities, where maintaining stability becomes more important than pursuing maximum objectives. In that process, external pressures, economic, political, and diplomatic, play a major role. Eventually, a point is reached where continuing the conflict becomes less beneficial than adjusting strategy, and that's where we start to see transitions. Now, let's address a few key questions. Will this situation escalate into something much larger? While uncertainty always exists, there are strong reasons why major escalation is generally avoided. The risks are too high, and the consequences are difficult to predict or manage. Will there be direct negotiations? Possibly, but not always in the way people expect. Indirect communication, intermediaries, and gradual steps are often more common than direct high-profile agreements. And how long does this take? That's the hardest question. These processes don't move quickly. They depend on multiple variables, and small changes can have large effects over time, but the direction matters more than the exact timeline. And the direction suggests a gradual shift toward a more balanced, multi-actor system, where influence is distributed rather than concentrated. So, to summarize, this is not about certainty. It's about probability. It's not about predicting exact events, but understanding the forces that shape them. And if those forces continue to develop in the way they are now, then the most likely outcome is not a sudden ending, but a gradual transition into a new equilibrium. That's the logic. That's the framework. And like any analysis, it can be challenged, tested, and improved. Because the goal isn't just to be right, it's to think clearly, question assumptions, and understand the world at a deeper level.